I taught intermediate traditional staff, and really what I was trying to go for was trying to really make it about creation and coming up with ideas as opposed to trying to get everything perfect. So my whole thing is when I'm teaching a staff class, because people are going to drop the staff, I always make them pick it up in a really cool way. So we started the first part of the class learning a lot of different cool ways to pick it up. We talked about you can do anything from just cartwheels to, if you wanted to, you can do a somersault, which I said you got to make sure that you grab the staff first and come through. So there's a lot of different ways that you can pick up the staff, but what we also worked on was a lot of different ways to pick it up with your feet. One is putting it right in the middle and popping it up. Another way is having it on your feet, catching it, catching it on your thigh and picking it up. Another way is putting it 3/4 of the way up and popping it up. Another way is 3/4 of the way up, but doing the same thing and giving it more momentum so that you can keep it going and not lose flow. Another way is to go up, so you've got the short, again 3/4 of the way, but shorter end towards you, and you bring it close, and your shin pushes as your foot kicks, and you keep it going like that. And then another one is where you got to roll my hands for this, and I recommend not doing this with boots, but what you're doing is you're twisting, you're putting your right foot in about maybe 6 inches or so from the center out, and you're trying to spin it around onto your left foot, which is in front of the staff, so that it looks something better than that, if I get it right. But third time's the charm. So you bring it up like that. So we talked about those different ways of picking it up. Then we went into a lot of the just the basic things they need to understand, like planes, talking about how this is the wall plane as though you're standing in front of a wall, talking about how this is the wheel plane as though you're in a car, beep beep, and talking about how this is a floor plane, which of course is very obvious. This probably was not the most creative name for it, but that's what we have. Then we talked about turning, and I always say that with turning, you really want to turn in the direction that the staff is moving. So for me, it's moving to the right, so I would turn to the right, turn all the way around. Because for me, it's all about dancing and finding a way to move to the music, and the more you can turn, the more you can move, and that's really what makes it great. But then we talked about how if you turn the staff also once while you stay stationary, then you can obviously turn the opposite direction. So here we are, just again, being able to turn opposite direction by turning with the staff, and also turning the staff while you remain stationary. So sometimes the staff is the prop, and other times you're the prop. Then we talked about the way that we spin it, and we talked about imagining that there's a circle, turning with it, and now we talked about spinning the staff. So if we're in the wall plane, we talked about imagining that there's a circle, and really taking the center of the staff and moving it around the circle. So this is called in spin, because the staff is moving in the same direction as you are moving around the circle. And then we talked about how to do the 5-point star, which is to keep the staff going in the same direction, but move in the opposite direction with your body around this circle that you're envisioning. And of course, this is anti-spin, how you do the 5-point star. Then from there, what we did was we talked about just the different things that you can do with the staff as far as like changing speeds, changing directions, how you can really interact with the staff, how the staff while you're dancing really is your partner. And learning different things you can do. One of the things we talked about was isolations, and how to, and with isolations, a taller staff is more difficult, but what you do is the idea of an isolation is that one point of your object, of your prop, does not move in space. So for example, if we take one point of the staff and we say that this wick is going to be the isolation point, then we would be moving it around the staff. And of course you can use 2 hands if it's easy, but this is obviously harder because it's a long staff. But it doesn't mean that you can't go side to side, and of course go around, and then go the opposite direction over here. So there's a lot of things you can do, and again, when we talk about changing speeds and isolation and turning, it gives you the opportunity to also work with tempos of music. In addition to that, I traditionally like to teach contact staff, but since it was a traditional staff, I taught some no contact. So we talk about halos and contact staff, which is where this is a halo, but when we're doing it in the traditional staff, what we do is the same thing, except we hold on to while we're doing it, and that becomes a tracer. So this would be a tracer. And I also talked about how we can do this with 2 hands, where if we're moving that same direction, left palm up, right palm down, and we could go around and around like this. Then what we talked about as far as continuing with contact staff is neck wraps. And one great way of doing a neck wrap is just hand to hand, hand to hand. And of course you can do this in the floor plane as well, hand to hand. And this is a great way to start to transition into contact staff because you can actually start to let go a little bit. But with traditional staff, we just pass it one to the next. And as the last no contact, which is still somewhat contact, we talked about palm spins, which is basically, this would be a palm spin. And the idea of the palm spin, for me at least, is that I like to spin it between the middle finger and the ring finger. That's where I really like to feel it. And you're using your thumb to push it around the same direction. Now if you decide that you want to go to the other hand and do a palm spin in the same direction, it would be your fingers that are kind of pulling it a little bit more. But as we talked about this, and then we moved into tosses, and a great way of starting with tosses from here is to talk about the palm toss, which is pushing it up and catching it like that. And one of the big things with this is you're bringing it down to give it some momentum to push up, and when it comes down you want to cradle it, because that's the thing with flow. And you want to make, because if you catch it hard, it seems jerky, and it also can be hard on your wrist. So we talked about that, and then we talked about doing just a toss from the wall plane, which would be as such. And again, you can see I'm coming up from the up point, throwing it up, and coming down, and I'm giving it more of a cradle. And I'm catching it palm down. And I say that one of the important things about this is having your center taped, or at least parts around your center taped so you can see that is important because the center is really where you want to catch. I always say it's better to do it at the beginning of a spin because you've got more light from your fire, and also don't do it with one wick lit when the other one's already gone out because it's really difficult to see that one just with the center point with just one wick. When you've got one wick, that's a good time to do isolations. And then just to finish off, since we were talking about tosses, the most important part, the most awesome part, the best part to start off and say, look at me, I'm an awesome fire spinner, I'm having fun, is the spin-off. And I see so many people get the spin-off wrong, and what I was trying to do, and if you want to bring this in a little bit closer, I'll show you, the point that I try and do is you're pushing it away from you. So I take my dominant hand at least, and you can use the other hand, but what works for you, I have my right hand here, I have it in the middle, and I start with the pinkies at the top, and I'm pushing it all the way off, away from me, like that. And the idea is, it's not as important to get height, it's more important to get speed. So as we can see, that speed, that's what gets more of it off. So like that. And if you're getting it sort of tilting like this, it has to do less with the spin and has more to do with how you're letting go. So some people will let go like this, you want to go straight up. And the faster you can do that, the more speed you can get, and could you have told me my fly was down? And the more, better fireballs you can get. And really, that's the great part of spin-offs, and you always want to do that because they're awesome, and I'm lucky. That's traditional intermediate staff.